actually refresh my memory on this. Leighton Wilhite, that's right. James Bays, well, it's kind of a long story. In fact, I'll try to move it right along, but for a number of years, I've gone to the Ohio Valley Military Society Show of Shows, which is held the third week, about the fourth week in February, once a year, and has grown to at least 750 dealers. But anyway, it has been customary that on that Friday and Saturday, the show starts on Thursday for members and ends on Sunday. Anyway, that they'll have very noted veterans signing autographs, and that can be on books or whatever. And sometimes they'll charge maybe $10, $15 for their quote-unquote charity or whatever. Anyway, so not this past year, but the year before, I left early. And of course, there's always a kind of a booklet about the show, and a lot of advertisers in there, and as far as listing and their tables and that type of thing, but also what the veterans as to their significance in World War II, Korea, and also Vietnam now, because they're losing more and more veterans. Anyway, so I've got a picture I'll have to show you if you're not familiar with it, but I would say maybe 10 years ago, I was at the Show of Shows and met a gentleman, an artist out of Tennessee, and he did the most wonderful and meticulously painted in acrylic. They look like prints, but they're acrylic, of World War II aircraft, World War I, that type of thing. And I bought this fairly good sized canvas of a B-25 Mitchell that had hit in air and shown and shooting down a Japanese bomber. And after about 4 years of having this thing, I'm thinking, what am I going to do with this? Okay, so I had taken it to the Show of Shows maybe about 6 years ago, thinking maybe I'll sell it. I only paid like $100 for it. And then I saw these veterans, and one of the fellows had a silver marking pen. That's it. So from that point on, I've had these veterans. I've had 3 Medal of Honor winners sign it. I've had the co-pilot for Billy Mitchell in his April 1942 run over Tokyo. The list goes on and on and on. Anyway, so 2 years ago, this February, I left on a Thursday and then read it. And then here's this fellow by the name of James Bays with a very incredible story that saw the first and second raising of the flag on Mount Suribachi. So it took me a year, but I finally made contact with him. He lives in Carmel, Indiana. And a very incredible story. He was partially basically raised by an uncle, and I don't know quite the story, but he lived on the near east side of Indianapolis, like walking distance practically, evidently, to the circle. And at age, probably age 14, he said, I'm getting out of this. And so he became a courier for some of the, what's the courier service, transfer money, what am I thinking of? And still has it, Western Electric,
Western Union?
Western Union, I think Western Electric, but Western Union. And he said he applied, and they wanted to know if he had a bicycle. He said no. Well, next thing, he had to get a bike, and did, and did that for, maybe a year or so. And of course, the war was going on. And he was still, 16. And he and another fellow that was also a courier said, I'm going to the Navy. Okay. So they went to the recruiting office, and the recruiter said, well, how old are you? 16? I can't take you. And so somebody overheard that, are we making an inquiry? And he said, there's an older fellow down here, and he'll vouch that you are his son. So they went to another recruiting office. Yeah, he's my son. Okay, you're in. So at age 16, he lied his way into the U.S. Navy. And so he was on, where was it? I guess outside the Philippines, but he became a coxswain, a driver for one of the landing crafts with the flap goes down, and the Marines run out.
Is it a Higgins boat?
The Higgins wasn't that the larger, but was it when was it Higgins? Okay, well anyway, he was a driver, a pilot, which is a coxswain is the official term, and of course he was in the back and surrounded, and because he had probably some kind of windshield, but open. Well, of course, the Japanese, knowing that how important Iwo Jima was as far as a landing strip, because bombers couldn't get all the way to Tokyo without refueling. And the Japanese knew this, so they put over 20,000 Japanese soldiers on Iwo Jima and burrowed themselves into that like an anthill, which you're probably familiar with. And of course, knowing that the Americans were going to come, they threw everything they could out, to certainly discourage the landing. Anyway, so James, which I had the pleasure of meeting, and he's the story is just unbelievable. Anyway, so here he was, 16 years old, and the Marines climbed down off the rope ladders off the side of the ship into his Higgins boat, and they're about ready to go on shore, and then they took a direct hit from a mortar, killed everyone on board except him.
Wow.
Threw everybody out. So there he was, close to shore, but waiting with all these dead Marines and body parts and that type of thing. Another Marine saw him out there, waited out there, and pulled him on. James said, well, it took me 6 months to become a Navy guy. It took me 5 minutes to become a Marine, because that Marine said, here's your, here's a weapon. We'll get your helmet. You're fighting with us.
Wow.
So, I don't know how, a few days later, well, actually he went into a Navy hospital, I guess, for a couple of days. But anyway, he was back with this fellow, I think his name was Jack. And of course, you're best buddies now because he pulled you up on the shore and possibly saved your life. Anyway, so heavy fighting, and they were in a ravine or a foxhole, and another mortar comes down, and Jack was on his right-hand side and kills him.
Wow.
And puts James in a Navy hospital recovering for 7 months, of which he goes ahead there and gets his GED. And then he goes to Purdue and gets a degree, and then in Northwestern, a degree. And he becomes, he works for General Motors, and was up to become a vice president for General Motors. He was in Washington, D.C., and representing General Motors. And he said, I don't want to do that. I'm leaving. And he did so and started his own contracting business, which built hospitals, and he's been very, very successful at that. But he lives in Carmel, and I've got a picture. And his whole office, which is, I'm sure, was like a small bedroom, was supposed to be an office or something of that nature, is completely wall to wall with all these accolades, and he has saved everything and gone to all of these reunions and that type of thing. He went to the 75th reunion of, or the 70th, I guess, because the 75th, I think, is coming up next month, maybe, because it was in 1944. February 23rd, 1944, or 45. Okay, 1945. February 23rd, 1945 was the raising. Because that was the Joe Rosenthal photo. Well, anyway, so that was last April. And Natalie is quite the walker, you know. And so we went to Turkey Run, back in May. And there we were at Turkey Run. Of course, she, being a vegetarian, she was at the salad bar, and I was coming out of the salad bar, and I turned around with my, like this, and then here's a fellow about this tall, and he's wearing a baseball cap that says Iwo Jima on it. I said, well, were you on Iwo Jima? He said, yeah. Did you see the first, second raising of the flag? Yeah. He was a Marine, he was a tank driver.
Wow.
And he saw it through the periscope, because you don't look straight out of the tank, but he saw the first and second raising through the periscope. So he lives, Leighton lives in, is it Rockport? Yeah, west of Indianapolis, maybe by about 50 miles due west of Indianapolis. I think it's Rockport. And I met him there, and he signed it.
Wow.
So that is, I had a custom frame, and that is in museum glass, which is, you know, prevents ultraviolet light fading.
Fading.
Yeah. And
Wow.
I have one. So,
That's magnificent.
but both of those gentlemen, now I have pictures. Of course, I brought this last October, but it didn't work out for my coming down. And I took, and kind of inadvertently, I took the pictures of these gentlemen signing it. Of course, that's what you have to do, which I'll forward to you. And actually, that needs to be in my estimation, put on the back with, now Natalie, actually, we have to get it rewritten, but anyway, as far as maybe sealing it in plastic, because that picture's gonna outlast all of us, as to that both of these, and name them again, Wilton, or Leighton Wilhite and James Bays, both witnessed the first and second raising of the American flag on Mount Suribachi.
Wow.